Hello and welcome to this Churchyard Ramble. I am Jeff Richards, and I need to make sure that we can see the slides as we are pressing on. And today we are going to be looking at the life and times of Dorothy Mason. Now, as I said, I think I said right at the beginning, I'm Jeff Richards, and I'm one of the trustees of the Friends of St Nicholas Churchyard. And you've joined me on these virtual rambles before. Hopefully you have. If you've just discovered them for the first time, well, welcome, and thank you for joining me. We're doing these rambles around the churchyard on what is, looking out, is it had some showers today, but is otherwise a fine day. But we can't actually meet up in the churchyard. We can't do the real heritage trail stuff, where I can explain some things about the monuments and the history of Sutton that is told through the monuments of the churchyard. Now, it is all about St Nicholas's churchyard, and St Nicholas is, as you can see from this picture, very much at the heart of Sutton. And we need to stay home, we need to protect the NHS, and we need to save lives. So, unfortunately, we can't do this in person. But since this is a historic time, it is a perfect time in which to explore history. Now, I am enormously grateful for the support shown to these talks by Enjoy Sutton and the Sutton Civic Society. Enjoy Sutton brings together more than 500 local businesses and organisations and focuses on projects and services that support our town, its community and its businesses. Whereas the Sutton Civic Society is a civic society that aims to promote civic pride and aims to look at the progressive improvement of the quality of life for the town of Sutton and its environments and its inhabitants, as well as its visitors. And it's very much a critical friend for the council as we explore planning matters. Now, I am very excited today to say that we're now receiving a lot of encouragement from Sutton College for these talks. And if you want to know more about any of the topics that and themes that I talk about, and these talks we've touched on everything from slavery through to the Saxons, the Normans, the question of Roman division of land. We've looked at all sorts of touched impacts even today. And if you have any of these ideas on any of these topics, then please do have a word with our friends at Sutton College, who will be delighted to tell you all about the different history courses that they provide. Now, in normal years, in a normal September, and who knows if September is going to be normal in any way, but in a normal September, you would have an opportunity to look at something that is hidden, but is very, very wonderful. See, September is the month in which Heritage Open Days take place, and Open House London also takes place. And these are festivals and events that celebrate the architectural and social heritage of England. And if you come to St Nicholas at this time, that's when the Friends of St Nicholas Churchyard and the church cooperate in order to stage exhibitions and to open the church and to tell stories about this. And there's a monument inside the church which is opulent and extravagant, but it's not seen. And that's the monument here to Dorothy Brownlow. And that's the daughter of Sir Richard Mason that I was talking about last week. Now, these pictures that, as I explore the monument, were taken by John Kerr. John Kerr is one of the church wardens, that's the current church wardens of St Nicholas, and he is another trustee of St Nicholas Churchyard, the Friends of St Nicholas Churchyard as well. Now, this monument was described in 1832 by a visitor to the church, a chap called William Hone, in his book, the Yearbook of Daily Recreation and Information concerning remarkable men and manners, times and seasons, solemnities and merrymakings, antiquities and novelties. And William describes entering the church. The door standing open, we ventured into the church and found it upholden and in wondrous good repair, and not barren of remarkables, amongst which the gorgeous marble monument of Dame Dorothy Brownlow beside the altar claimed our first attention. She is represented in a recumbent posture, with 3 sorrowing children about her and 4 cherubs above, in a dish of hasty pudding garnished with slices of gilt gingerbread. Now, this monument was originally in the old church of Sutton. Now, this is a map dating from 1824 of the church. It's a plan of the church, and you might not be able to see this terribly well on the video, but if you look down, you'll see on the left-hand side, you'll see altar written and monument written there on the plan. Now that is showing you that the monument filled the entire north wall of the sanctuary, and it dominated it. And the plan is slightly strange because you're reading it from east to west. This is the old ecclesiastical way of representing any drawing. So you've always got the east on the left-hand side, and that's why it's rather strange, because actually the north is at the bottom of the plan. Now, over on the west end, which is on the right-hand side, you'll see the word tower. Well, the tower actually was not there in Dorothy Brownlow's day when she was alive. The tower, if I move on to slide, this shows you actually the church that Dorothy would have known. It's a spire, it's a wooden spire. There are other Surrey churches that look a little bit like this, but the tower was added sometime after 1790. Excuse me. I'm hoping that's a non-COVID cough. But anyway, there we have the tower that has been added sometime after 1790. And Dorothy's monument was moved along with all of the other monuments. I've talked about this before, where all the charity boards, all the monuments were moved from the medieval church, where they had gradually accreted onto the walls of the church, and moved into the new building when it was built in 1864. And so this is a plan of the church as it was built by Edwin Nash. So this is a plan by Edwin Nash, the architect of the church that was rebuilt in 1864. So that's 32 years after the visit to St. Nick's of William Hone. Now, in the rebuilding, you can see that the monument to this, and here we're looking at the top right of the picture, and you can see the word Vestry. Now, the vestry is the vestry where the priests get dressed, but actually if you look inside to the left of that wall, there is a chapel filled with pews pointing inwards towards the inwards towards the chancel, and on that wall you can see where the monument to Lady Brownlow actually is now based. And so the north and south chapels were filled with pews that pointed inwards towards the chancel, but it was very important that Lady Brownlow's monument had made the journey into the new church. And actually, what you can see is that it would have been immediately visible to anyone coming into the church from the entrance, the east entrance. And this is a photograph that was taken must have been taken somewhere before the 1900s, so probably from the 1890s, and you can see the monument peeking out from behind the pillars on the left-hand side. So if you look to the left, and you'll see it. Now, when this photograph was taken, and this is the next photograph, you can see everything has changed. Now, this photograph dates from 1903, and it's the interior view of the church, showing that everything has been reordered and redecorated. Not only has the an organ appeared and covered up the Brownlow monument, you can see that the pulpit has also changed as well for a cast iron affair. Now, this organ was built by Beard and Norman, or Norman and Beard I should say, of Norwich, and was completed in 1899, and this photograph is from 1903, when all of the reordering was completed. And it does mean, though, that now the Brownlow monument is only accessible by crawling into the organ using the organ tuner's access. And so it's impossible nowadays to get a full impression of the monument. Now, St. Nicholas actually has something of a history of covering up monuments. In addition to Dorothy Brownlow's monument being concealed behind what is actually quite an average musical box, and it was made more average by the Germans dropping a bomb in the churchyard in 1940, but the church authorities in the past have also decided to relegate the monument to Sarah Glover, which ties us to the printing press in America, to a broom cupboard. So this is one. This is where they built a broom cupboard around Sarah Glover's monument, and they built an organ around Dorothy Brownlow's. Now, this church habit of covering up monuments was called out in the 2018 exhibition to do with the Heritage Open Days, called Extraordinary Women, and it will raise the question as to whether heritage was a feminist issue, and whether actually the monuments, if they had been to men, would have been covered up at all. So that's a question to ask. Questions on a postcard, please. Now, interestingly, I'm going to move on to the next slide. It's worth pointing out that Historic England's listing of the church was great, and it was graded at grade 2 star, so that's one off grade 1, for the following principal reasons. So this is a historic church, and it says, this is the listing. It says it's listed for its architectural interest, and it's because it's one of the architect Edwin Nash's most impressive and complete churches, and the church contains an unusually high number of monuments from the early 17th century onwards, many transferred from the earlier parish church on the site, and some of which are of more special interest, also the charity boards and the medieval piscina from the earlier church as well. And the Brownlow monument, the one that you're looking at right now, is a major work by the sculptor William Stanton. Now, please note that the organ was not mentioned. It is not significant in terms of English heritage. Now, let's get back, though, to Dorothy herself. Dorothy was the eldest daughter of Sir Richard Mason, the man who's pictured here, that I'm showing you here, and her mum, Lady Anne Margaret Long, or when she started to suck up to the Queen, she suddenly, who was Portuguese, she started to become Anna Margareta. But I think I also mentioned that through this lady, Dorothy is able to claim a witch finder and executioner of witches as her grandfather as well. But anyway, Sir Richard Mason was a senior official in the court of King Charles II and Lord of the Manor of Sutton, and this is a map from the 17th century. Dorothy was born in the May of 1664. Her sister Anne was born a year later. 1664, 1665 were both plague years. Her sister, and they moved to Sutton when her father bought the manor in 1669. So Dorothy was 5 when she came to Sutton, and this was her home. This is what she remembered. The everything around here, the downs and the country and everything. That's what she would have known as her playground. And the home is likely to be the same house that the diarist John Evelyn mentioned as belonging to Lady Darcy, the family of one of the previous lords of the manor that John Evelyn himself visited in 1632. So there's good evidence that there were some really, really impressive buildings in Sutton, of which we have not a trace anymore. Now, if we have a look at the next slide, this is a portrait that we can see here of Dorothy Brownlow, and this is by Godfrey Kneller, and it was painted between 1680 and 1690, and what you can see here is she is in fashionable undress. This is retiring clothes. These are negligees. This is the things to wear when you are in your private chamber, intimating that you're going to bed. But it's not necessarily the clothes that you'd sleep in. But these are these are an impression that somebody wants to give. So it's very much an intimate family portrait. And you can see her nightgown is casually unfastened at the breast, and her chemise sleeves are caught up in puffs, probably with drawstrings. But she's very elegantly dressed. Now, she was about 20 when this portrait, 25, when she was painted, and she married, she married when she was 20 to William Brownlow. Now, William Brownlow, I like him. He's sort of chubby, like me. Goodness, I think that's, if you have a look at his stomach there, it's obviously somebody, he was a runner. Probably not. But anyway, Sir Richard Brownlow here was eventually became the 4th baronet. He was the son of Sir Richard Brownlow, the 2nd baronet, and Elizabeth Freak. And so this was in 1684 that she got married, and she probably started their married life in Sutton. This is because the Brownlow family started to rebuild Belton House in Lancashire. Belton House is the place that was owned by the Brownlows, and it was their family seat, and it's through Belton House and the National Trust collection there, which owns now Belton House, that I've been able to source these portraits. So they all come from the collection at Belton House. Now, the mason that they used for a lot of the work at Belton House was a chap called William Stanton, and he's going to be important because he eventually becomes the man who carves the monument and designs the monument for Dorothy. So Dorothy was celebrated by her family for what she was and what she did. And she did everything that was expected of her, everything that was expected of a woman of her rank, her position, and what she needed to do from a family perspective, which is to provide her husband with lots and lots of children. Now, this is a portrait of William and Mary. William and Mary are here being formally offered the crown of England after Mary's father, James II, had run away. So it's after this is part of the Glorious Revolution. Now, Dorothy's father, Sir Richard Mason, had actually been in the chamber when Charles II died, and when James II were acceded to the throne. So he had technically served as this financial controller and master of the clerk to the running of the palace and the court under two kings. Now, that was very important, but the Glorious Revolution changed everything. You've got in 1688, when the Glorious Revolution took place, they had only 1688 when the revolution took place, they'd only just in 1685 appointed a new, very high Tory priest to the rector of Sutton, to be rector of Sutton. Now, this priest, Jeremiah Oakley, I mentioned him last week. Now, he actually had to be deprived of his living in 1690 because he was a non-juror. He would not swear allegiance to the new king and queen. So he was sacked because he refused to say this, but he was then replaced by a chap called William Stevens. So the family flip-flopped. So you've got, starting off as High Tory, and then they appoint William Stevens. And William Stevens is this very, very vocal. He's somebody full on in the Enlightenment, full on in the rational engagement with things like deism, and he's very much Protestant. He was definitely on the Whiggish side and positively anti-Catholic. His sermons had cheery names like A Second Delivery from Popery and Slavery, or A Sermon Preached to the Protestants of Ireland now residing in London in commemoration of their deliverance. So he's an ideal subject for another ramble. I've just bought a collection of his sermons. I am so looking forward to reading those, but I'll be able to update you on more about him. He was one, later on, he was sentenced to stand in the stocks because he was something of a uncomfortable person when it comes to Whiggish tendencies. Anyway, back to Dorothy, and then you should go back to Dorothy. Let's go back to Dorothy. Let's see. Oops, I managed to lose where I was there. And back to Dorothy. Here we are. Now, this is another wonderful, wonderful picture of Dorothy. You can see Dorothy is holding onto a plant. She's secured the branch in her hand, and her other hand is resting in her lap, where flowers and blooms are shown. So she's secured the branch of the Brownlow family, and her lap is fruitful. So this is indicating, again, what she's done here is done her job. And in her 16 years of marriage, she gave birth to 5 children. So there was Anne Brownlow. She was born the year of their marriage in 1685. She was to die in old age in 1779. There was Richard Brownlow, who was born in 1689, their first son, but he died when he was a year old. Sir John Brownlow, who was to become their heir, he was born in 1690, the same year as his big brother died. He was born in the November, and he was to live a long life, dying in 1754. So there was also a Dorothy Brownlow, born 1695, and the year really when Dorothy fell, just before Dorothy really fell ill, was William Brownlow, their second son, who was born on the 25th of April, 1699. So their son, John Brownlow, becomes significant in the story of Anne, Dorothy's sister, and I'll talk more about John Brownlow next week. But he wasn't a very nice man when it came to dealing with his aunt. But Dorothy, you can see here this beautiful woman. this wonderful, wonderful mum. She was only 36 when she died in 1700. Her husband would go on to marry a lady called Henrietta Brett, and she was the sister of a Henry Brett, who was already his brother-in-law, because Henry Brett had married Anne, Dorothy's sister. So there's a very close, odd family relationship here. But I'm going to cover more of that next week. But Dorothy, she's buried in Sutton, so is Richard, her father, buried in Sutton. I think as well, Lady Mason as well, is buried in Sutton. Again, it's only the Brownlow, Dorothy's memorial is the really big one. We may have trace of another Brownlow tomb on the north side of the church in the churchyard. Now, the design for this tomb, a monument of hers, is actually in the V&A. We're talking sort of significance here. The design was acquired in 1898, and it was originally linked to a guy called Caius Gabriel Cibber. And I have to say that when I did the research for the Extraordinary Women exhibition, I think I linked it. I accredited the design to Cibber, but actually it was William Stanton, the mason, who designed this, and that correct attribution was actually corrected by the V&A in the mid-century. So it should be thought of as William Stanton. And it's a tragedy that this wonderful woman died at 36, so young. It's a double tragedy, I think, that her tomb, her monument, has been so despoiled by the way in which it's been treated. But next week, I'm going to ramble on about Anne, her sister, and it may be a longer ramble because, frankly, it's bonkers, some of the things that happened to her. Her life, so we're now looking at Anne, everything that you could think of as being, good is changed here. It's everything that was for Dorothy was ruined for Anne. Dorothy kept her good looks and she died renowned as a beauty when she was 36. Anne got smallpox. Anne had a pretty good husband in William, but actually Anne's first husband was horrible, and we're going to be looking at topics around domestic abuse and a brutish husband next week. So whereas Dorothy was the epitome of beauty, grace and motherly and wifely duty, poor Anne suffered the scars of smallpox, a brutal husband, and she eventually made history in her own right, though, during a long life. And I'll explain more of that next week. The topics that we have talked about, as I said, any of these ideas, go and talk to the people at Sutton College. They're working on a new programme. They'll all be delighted to be able to help you find the right course that will explore any of the topics that we've talked about today. Now, I hope you've enjoyed listening to the stories. If you want to give me some tips on how I can improve things, my intention has always been to inform, to educate and hopefully entertain you in this ramble, then please do get in touch with me and let me know how I can improve things. But for now, I'll say goodbye. So long, Sutton, your history.